Good morning, everybody. How y'all doing? You feeling all right? Thank you guys so much for joining us at the 9th New Orleans Entrepreneur Week presented by Iberia Bank. We are in for a special treat this morning. The next 3 days, Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday, are Noe Interactive. That's the core of our content for the business community. We'll have roundtables, seminars, sessions, and networking events, but my favorite part of that lineup is the keynotes. We'll have a keynote speaker every day at 11 a.m. and 4 p.m., and the first in that lineup is Miss Kelly Hoey. We are so excited to have Kelly down here. Kelly is a networking expert, and she will tell you a little bit more about that. But as you all know, we like to get to know one another in New Orleans. Networking is a big part of our culture. And as a connector and networking expert, Kelly has been lauded everywhere from Forbes to Fast Company for her unique ability to tap into networks and make valuable connections. Kelly also recently released a book called Build Your Dream Network, which is available for sale on site in the Stax bookshop right inside the CAC. So pick a copy and make sure she signs that before she leaves today. But without further ado, I'm honored to introduce Kelly Hoey and her moderator, entrepreneur extraordinaire, Sean Carrigan.
Let's see. So we got the handheld mics today. Good morning, everybody. How you doing? And so I'm here with Kelly. Thank you for having us. She's fresh off a plane from New York City this morning, so thank you for coming down.
Slightly crusty off a plane.
But no, it was really great to have Kelly come down here for Noe. She's got a ton going on, which we'll get into, and obviously get into kind of where she excels and specializes. But first, we kind of want to just tell you why the heck I'm up here with Kelly.
Shoe on the other foot.
Yes, I know. So last January, Mobile Qubes was featured on CNBC on a program called Power Pitch. And Kelly is a veteran member of the firing squad on that show. And I was sitting in the green room kind of sweating, thinking about how I'm not going to make an ass out of myself on national television. And in comes in this ball of energy, dynamic woman, and just starts talking to me. And I was like, oh my God, what am I doing here? But turned out to be Kelly Hoey, and we just kind of struck up a friendship there and kind of stayed in touch ever since.
I think I was helping to calm you, or maybe put more fear on you in terms of, here's the way Power Pitch works. And that was sort of one of my things with that, doing those episodes and being in the green room and sort of getting a sense of the entrepreneur before we went out there and saying, all right, here's how it works. This is about marketing. This is what you got to do. This is what's going to happen. At the end of the day, if you don't like what we say, suck it up, look at the camera and say, thanks for the feedback, because we want a good soundbite.
Right. That's and
you seemed like a nice guy, and I was like, here, this is the way it works.
Yeah, it was a little it was the first time I had ever worn makeup, so I was a little caught off guard, but it was a great experience. But really from there, it's very easy to realize why Kelly has excelled at pretty much everything you've done. And very quickly started learning more and more about her background as kind of this super networker, super connector, and there's really a science behind it. So, the first question for everybody out here that I want to ask you is, what do you feel networking really is, both as kind of an activity and a mindset? Because I think the image that most people get from networking is bad food, bad drinks, walking into a crowded room of perfect strangers and not really knowing what to do next.
And running from horror from that situation. So where do I want to start on this? My entire career is explained by networks and relationships. And as I say, it's kind of how a lawyer from Canada, ends up in New York and suddenly has, not suddenly, the overnight success at 51, has a book out at this point. But I am a reluctant networker, which is kind of amusing. I am not an extrovert. We can talk about that later too. But because I have purposefully achieved goals with the help of others, it was the reason for writing the book and to want people to rethink what networking is. Because you say the word and you go exactly where Sean started, was you have this image immediately of a cocktail party, you're standing there trying to balance stuff, you have to meet people, and it's horrifying for all of us. And as an activity, I think of networking as every single human interaction. So your decision to be here, in this, not just here at New Orleans Entrepreneur Week, but to be here in this room, and where you chose and who you chose to sit next to. And maybe you left an out-of-office message to say to people you wouldn't be in the office today because you'd be here. Or maybe you changed your voicemail. All of those things, from your headshot to your email signature line, to the groups, the activities, every time in my mind that you're bumping into another human being, that is networking. And so I think about what are the ways you can improve those interactions, and how can you ensure, as a cumulative activity, all of those networking opportunities move you and where you're going forward. If I could help people not have to, work a room that they don't want to be in ever again, my work is done, and, maybe this will be my last career as opposed to, whatever number of careers I'm on at this point. The other, you hit on mindset. I personally think, pull out your Craig Claiborne or your Miss Manners, the original editions of those when they came out. I think networking in this day and age, we've been too lulled by the speed and the efficiency of swiping and tapping and friending and think we now have a connection. And those old rules of networking still apply. And it doesn't matter if you are connecting with someone in person or if you're making that connection online. You need to, pull out some of those, I want to say, just human decency and courtesy, and use those same rules. So,
Yeah, so I think that, you touched on a point there, and it's a good segue to my second question, which is, how do you feel that networking has evolved with, the rise in technology and social media platforms and just the way that we operate, the sharing economy, the Ubers of the world, where everything that we have and want can pretty much be gotten at the push of a button, a send of a message, or what have you. So how has kind of the principles of solid networking evolved and either ring true or need to be revisited based on kind of the world we live in today?
yeah, and I'm glad you touched on that, because that's one of those things I think we get so wrapped up in the technology that we sort of forget that, I know we like to think maybe it's this that's running the world, but it's the people who are holding those things. And for me, what's so much, as you said, the sharing economy and all of these platforms reveal that how we get ahead in life is because of community and other people. People help us. An app is not, giving us that ride share. It's that person behind the wheel. So how are you using these trends? How are you engaging within them so that you can connect better to other people?
Yeah, so, can you think of a specific example? I'm big on specific examples, so, because I need my small mind to connect the dots that way. So can you think of a specific example lately of how maybe you've seen somebody use technology, or you've interacted with someone in a new technology or a new platform that proved very effective, and you kind of had that light bulb where you're like, okay, this is a pretty effective technique that this person's using, or this person's just obviously a great connector or networker?
Well, I'm glad you said example. So, I would say in good networking etiquette, the book is not just all about me. It is all case study driven, because what I had seen was so many people who were within my network who would achieve some end goal, and I had them, kind of back into it and say, how did you connect into this? And those people who are sort of more purposeful and focused and use everything to their advantage are the ones that I think going to achieve higher results, and understanding that whether we're online or offline, you're dealing with another person, and this is just another communication channel where they're choosing to start the engagement. When I think about in my own life, the number of people who I know because, the conversation started in the cocktail party that is Twitter. And then somehow, at some point was, offline. But the depth of the relationship from that first in-person conversation, far, I want to say, sort of deeper and richer because we'd already been conversing in this other, room, for lack of a better term.
Right. So it seems to me, and I think a lot of us can have had this similar experience where, just like you said, the platforms, the technology, the tools that we have out there are almost, just that, tools for kind of taking it and having a deeper relationship or a deeper connection with the person that we're trying to get to. But at the end of the day, what do you feel is the goal or end goal for this idea of networking?
Well, for me, as soon as you say the end goal, so when you think about networking, it is both an activity and a mindset. For me, it's also a process. And the process of networking for me always starts with the end goal. Where is it that I want to go to? Which direction am I headed? Because if I know that, I know which people I need to connect with. And then I can think about where is the best networking room? Where is the best venue? What's the best communication tool so that I can connect better with that other person? And so that's, for me, the end goal always comes first. The activity, like, do I show up here today, or do I, stay on Twitter just tweeting the event and connecting with people that way? Do I send a text message, leave a voicemail? By the way, if anyone ever calls me and leaves a voicemail, it means you didn't listen to my voicemail. My voicemail says, don't leave me a voicemail. I don't check them. The number of people who still leave me voicemails is comical. But where was I on all this? Of course, we get this little bit of a distraction there. If you start with where you're headed, as I said, then you can figure out, as I said, who is the right person to connect to. Then, this is where I think some of this, the advantage we have now with networking is we leave such a digital footprint and so much information, even the absence of information is information, that we can figure out better ways in terms of interests, in terms of communication preferences, how to connect with someone and who the right person is. And then we can actually make a better networking choice. The things in life that we haven't been able to hack, time is probably number one on that list. And since you can't, get more hours in the day, how can you network more efficiently? And I think also by networking in a much more purposeful and focused way, you're being far more considerate to the people you're connecting with.
Got it. So you brought up your voicemail, and you brought up people ignoring your voicemail, and that seems like a pretty big mistake, non-starter with you. But what would you say, I think this would be helpful for everybody to understand, what would you say is the biggest networking mistake that people traditionally make?
So this answer's coming up, and I wasn't going to tell you yesterday, but I did when we were chatting beforehand. So number one networking mistake is what 99% of the startups I met on Power Pitch don't do, and you do. And the number one networking mistake is the failure to follow up.
I didn't leave a voicemail, by the way.
You did not.
I stayed out of your voicemail.
I say to all the companies that I've met on Power Pitch, follow up, let me know how you're doing. And I'm not meaning the follow-up that all of them do. Right after taping a show like that, they send the obligatory, hey, great to meet you, thanks so much, really appreciated your feedback, blah, blah, whatever. That's like, you thank a host or hostess for having you over for dinner, but the real follow-up. And that's where you stay top of mind. That's where people go, oh yeah, right, I got an opportunity for you. That's where those bonds of trust. Because that, I'm going to say trust and reputation still underlie networking. If I'm going to open up my Rolodex, now you really know how old I am because I said Rolodex and I know what it is. But, if I'm going to open up my contacts, if I'm going to put my reputation on the line, who am I going to do that for? It's somebody else. I have, I see a pattern of behavior that leads me to make an assumption in terms of who they are as in this case, as a startup founder. So that failure to follow up, because it is such a missed opportunity. So, if you're sitting there and you're thinking, oops, send the email or, close that loop to let somebody know. If someone made an introduction for you that landed the job, you probably said to them, hey, thanks for the meeting and agreeing to introduce me to Bob, who you think may give me a job. If you haven't closed the loop with that person to say, by the way, Bob or, Diane or whoever gave me the job, close that loop. The last thing you want, someone who is making connections or that valuable mentor or someone in your network, for them to get information from somebody else, close that loop. If you're looking for a job and you're thinking, oh my God, I can't pester them every week to see if they've made a hiring decision, keeping people informed. And I joke, when you write a book on networking, you have to eat your own dog food. I have to follow the advice between the covers. It's really at times. But there was a time when I co-founded a startup accelerator, and there was a company that wanted to get involved, and you'd appreciate this. You're like, verbal, we're going to do it, thumbs up. And then my contact goes silent for 6 months. But I sent emails about every 4 weeks saying this is what we were up to and this is what's happening. And I learned the very painful art of sending emails that did not require a response from the other person, but kept them informed. And 6 months later, the contact reached out to me and said, oh my God, I'm so embarrassed. Thank you for keeping me informed. Our company was going through a restructuring. I couldn't function. And I'm thinking to myself, Lord, you couldn't function. It's been, 6 months and you can't even respond to an email. But I can tease about it, but I'm not her. And I wasn't in her shoes. And so, we picked up and off to the races after 6 months. But
Yeah, well, I think, when people hear networking, they think about networking. So often it's just about that act of, I've now connected to you, and okay, that's great, and we're you friended me on LinkedIn or Facebook or whatever, but now what? And so talking about how that follow-up is key, and
and just being observant, and follow-up is are you posting regularly on LinkedIn? I would like to get eyeballs in places where the people in my network can consume content, consume information, can see things at their own time and at their own choice. But one of the best things you can do is just become like a student of your own network. It doesn't surprise me now with my network when I get emails from someone who's like, oh my God, I've been watching what you've been doing for the last 8 years. Sorry, I've been out of touch. I love all your newsletters, blah, blah, blah. They consume a lot of this stuff, but they're not, in my face every minute going, yay,
Right.
thumbs up or all the rest of it, but they're consuming it all.
Well, so, you're big on social media. So Twitter, obviously, we had some Twitter exchanges this morning, and,
That's my cocktail party.
Right, exactly.
Who doesn't like to go to a cocktail party every day? Come on.
So let's talk a little bit about, Twitter specifically, but social media in general. So, you talked about how you followed up with emails and informing emails, and so often I think that follow-up is just that. It's emails, it's phone calls, some leaving voice messages or not. I'm old-fashioned. I'm a handwritten note guy sometimes. So send a handwritten note, throw a wrench in it, get some attention. But so Kelly has been named one of the most influential 100 women on Twitter, and so you are active.
That's what I went to law school for. It's really proud of that one. My parents are thrilled.
Are ecstatic.
Yeah,
you got a little plaque at home.
Yeah.
Good. But yeah, so can you tell, I think it's so immediate, it's that instant connection where you can literally have a dialogue with someone remotely, but how do you use Twitter, and how do you see kind of your connections using Twitter to keep those relationships going?
Right. So for me, for social media, again, I think of it as it's the people behind the profiles. And these are just extensions of the rooms where we connect with other people, as opposed to worrying about what's the technology and how do I use this. It's like, how do I talk to someone else? And for me, I mean, I'll focus on for me, what are the big three? LinkedIn. Just so you know, in my mind, we're sitting in LinkedIn right now. You're all sitting there nice and quiet, you're observing, right? Someone might ask a question at some point. It's a business event, you're on your good behavior right now, you know, you're all looking sharp, humidity hasn't kicked in, but it's business. Like I was a lawyer, so for me, walking into LinkedIn is, you know, a big New York law firm or, you know, an ABA conference. Facebook for me is friends and family. Little bleeding on that one, an extension now because of having a book as opposed to my original use of it. And Twitter, as I've already alluded to, it's the cocktail party. People wonder, how do you use Twitter? I'm like, how are you a good guest at a party? Like, we've all stood in a bar and someone's come running in screaming their heads off. Well, people do that on Twitter in all caps all the time. But if you want to go and have conversations, I mean, think about like when you're able to walk into a bar and listen to a whole bunch of different conversations, and because you're interested, you can dip into a whole bunch of them. That to me is Twitter, and that's been the beauty of it, because it has enabled me to now have conversations with people that I would never in my wildest dreams imagine I'd have a conversation with. And so like one of the people I have conversations with, and we're like good friends on Twitter, is the author Tom Peters. Like, I never thought I'd have a conversation with Tom Peters.
Right.
And there we are, conversing on Twitter. And he's like, hey, bought a copy of your book. And I'm like, oh my God, Tom Peters bought a copy of my book. And then I'm like, why'd you do that? I would have sent it to you. And then I said, I bought your book. And he goes, why would you do that? I'd send it to you. And we'd have these like, and I'm like, why would I ever have a conversation with him? Oh, that's right. I was kind of just a decent guest at a party that he happened to be holding court, you know? Do a little retweet as a way of saying I agree with what you're saying, or liking something. It's kind of like that nod, I hear you, that we would do at a party. And next thing I know, I'm having conversations with Tom Peters.
Yeah, it is an interesting experience where, you know, you do have, in some ways, that access to people that would be hard to get with a phone call or with an email. So, I mean,
Right.
I think we've used that as a tool ourselves. And, you know, it's just interesting to see as these platforms come up, just how different, that is so far from being in a room at a little cocktail party and trying to
like when
strike
someone
somebody up.
Yeah, someone says to me, oh, I'm going to, you know, have someone else tweet for me. I'm like, would you send someone else to a cocktail party for
Right.
you? No.
Right.
Like, you're better off, in my mind, you're better off using these platforms infrequently rather than being told by someone, you must tweet 5 times a day, or, you know, some such kind of thing. Like, you're better off doing it infrequently and being yourself than having somebody else do it for you.
That makes sense. Good point. So Kelly has mentioned the book a couple times, and at this point, I just want to give everybody the heads up. She's brought gifts, but we're doing some Q&A. So if you ask really good questions, Kelly may give you a book to take home with. So
We'll maybe take an audit. We'll crowdsource. You know,
Yeah.
as we're talking about trends of the economy.
We'll figure
crowdsource
out a
good
metric
question.
for it, yeah.
We'll figure out something.
But so we'll do a Q&A at the end. So if you have questions for Kelly, just get them ready. But there's a couple more questions.
You're going to keep going in the questions, but I'll put the warning out now. So I know I've talked about the book in the sense of that I look at networking differently and the approach to networking differently, because I have this massive frustration with, you know, like articles that say, hey, the 10 things you can do on a Monday morning to be a better networker. It's like, if there was a list of 10 things we could all do to be better networkers and that was it, damn it, I would be the first one, like, you know, celebrating. We have the list, everyone just do this. It's sort of like brushing your teeth, flossing, you know, do your sit-ups, like all that, drink 8 glasses of water. But, you know, we're dealing with other people, so it's always complicated and messy. But there is one networking tip, and you might have been going to ask about this. So here's the one time, first of all, I think it's an overlooked networking opportunity. 2, I think it's the one time you need to have your elevator pitch nailed. It's Q&A at a conference or an event like this. Because when you step up to that mic, all of us are going to know you. And what are we going to think of that first impression? So when you come up to the mic to ask a question, whether it's today or any time, do not overlook this as maybe your most powerful networking opportunity at a conference. Say who you are, say what you do, and ask your question.
No pressure.
No, it's worse. Listen, now, you're going to be happier that I told you this is the way to do it than getting up there and going, and you go on and everyone's sitting there going, is there a question in there? Like, who are you? Like, make that really strong impression, and now you've made that impression with everybody.
So she took my last question as the setup for Q&A, but that's okay. We
Oh,
can come back to it.
You'll come up with another question.
I will. But no, so there's...
Because I wanted to get them really scared and nervous, just like you were in the power
Just
pitch.
let them wait for a little while. Yeah, that's
green
good.
room. Yeah, that's what I'm waiting for.
So Kelly lives in New York, but you fly all over the place.
Mm-hmm.
And, being in
With
New
my
Orleans...
mobile cube.
That's right.
Goes everywhere with me.
That's right. It's out in the lobby, by the way, if anybody needs to charge their phone. As an entrepreneur and, going to raise money and trying to grow a company, everybody always says, man, you got to get out to Silicon Valley. You got to get to New York. That's where the infrastructure is. That's where the people are. That's where the fundraising is, yada, 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 yada. We're based in New Orleans. We want to stay in New Orleans. We want to continue to grow our company and raise money and provide jobs and grow the economy here and be part of the great community that Idea Village and all the other entrepreneurial organizations are about. So how would you recommend to people who may not be in one of the coasts, Silicon Valley or New York, on how to connect across a geography or, not having that access to the infrastructure that's there in those cities?
So first of all, I'd say you need to have a strong, as a country, we need to have multiple strong ecosystems. So to have, 2 or 3, that's just complete and utter imbalance. And so you need to be here. So if you're some under illusion that it's going to be easier to raise money and life is grand in New York City, I'll speak to you later and slap that one out of you. But we also need that. We need that greater dialogue between ecosystems. I'm here because I am a limited partner in Laconia Ventures, and one of the general partners, went to Tulane and committed to this environment, and that's fantastic. If there's opportunities and across places that we can get involved in, contribute to, add value, then we should be doing that. But this is also where, when you're thinking, I'm here and they're there, this is where, in some ways, the advantage with, if you take that focused, purposeful approach to networking, where you can actually, because of necessity, really put it to work. And alluded to it before, we all leave these big digital footprints. Crazy thing, people like Fred Wilson at Union Square Ventures isn't tweeting and blogging because he's got nothing better to do all day, right? He is putting out information like so many investors are, putting out newsletters, sharing points of view, sharing insights, speaking at conferences like this that are getting recorded and putting up on YouTube or somewhere else. That's where you start your networking. And you start gathering all that kinds of information. So one, you understand the other ecosystem. You also understand the people you want to connect with. And you probably narrow down your list of people who you should be connecting with. Because there's a reality of, if depending on the investors, where geographically, put aside the type of products and services and technologies they like to invest in, there may be a geography limit. So it might be great to have that person as an investor if they only invest in companies within, that smaller region or area, good to know what they're thinking about, but start your networking that way. But, by understanding the ecosystem, by understanding who the players are, you can get so much of that before you even step in. And you also have a better idea of how and where to spend your time once you decide, like, you know what, I do need to engage with those investors in whether it's Nashville, Boston, Omaha, wherever it may be.
So just like anything, doing your research, doing your homework before you kind of equip yourself to go and open up those potential connections is the key.
Right. And see if it's going to be worth your time. Because you may say, yeah, it would be great, but it's not worth it for my angel, my seed, or, my Series A. But I should start meeting those people, down the line. So let me start following and seeing what's going on. Let me plan a trip to Silicon Valley or, New York, and I'm going to plan it around these events because this seems to be when everything is happening. It's sort of better for your own sort of state of health, let alone your networking outcome.
And so how do you feel about kind of like the cold, I'll call it a cold call, cold open, someone who just kind of comes right at you?
If you're doing a cold email, it's because you've literally exhausted everything you can think of to get a warm intro. Because if you can get a warm intro, it makes all the difference. And when I say warm intro, I mean really having someone who can meaningfully make something as opposed to, hey, just sort of half-hearted, oh yeah, I met them once, here, let me make the introduction, because oops, you don't want to rely on I want to say sort of a faulty reputation because it's not going to add to your own case. In terms of how to make a good cold outreach, I have to think what chapter it's in. It might be chapter 2. Jessica Peltz is at KBS Ventures. Jessica, in 2001, 2002, graduate of Indiana, thought she was getting a job in Chicago, fell flat, didn't get it, and so she decided she'd take a job in New York. She was originally in Madison Avenue, advertising, and she didn't know anyone. Her case study on how to do that outreach, so that was, as she would say, that was before there was, LinkedIn and all the online, the robust tools we have now for research. So she subscribed to every one of the publications, Advertising Age, all the rest of it. She showed me, she still had the notebooks from when she did this job search, and she was showing me pictures of it. I was cracking up. But she was like, okay, first of all, I need to understand my industry. I need to understand what's going on. I need to spot where there's the opportunities. So she watched when brands, brand campaigns were awarded and moved to new agencies because she knew at that point someone was going to have to staff up. So she was watching those trends. She was seeing which agencies they went to. She was seeing who the winning partners were. She was looking and seeing what was going on there. And then she sent customized cover letters showing that she knew the industry, she knew all this workings of it, and saying, and by the way, I know you're now going to need to staff up, and here's why I'm the person for the job. If you're not prepared to do that kind of work, and I understand your pain. As a startup, I understand an industry, I understand your pain. You've just been given this massive, big, new campaign from Coca-Cola, and guess what? You don't have enough people to work on it. To the rescue, here I am. And that case study to me, if you're not prepared to do that kind of work like Jessica did, then you know what? If it makes you happy being able to say to people, saying, oh, I sent 40 emails out today, looking for a job, and I'm going to do the same thing tomorrow. If you're a numbers person that way and hope, you kind of win the lottery with someone responds, good on you, but I think it's a waste of time.
Right.
Spend your time researching.
No, that's helpful. I know, I've talked to a lot of entrepreneurs who are starting their business and, going after that big whale account, and they're just like, I don't know how to do this. So they wind up doing that cold outreach, and, 9 times out of 10, nothing comes from it. So I think that's helpful to kind of put it in perspective and say, here's what you have to do on the front end to make it most effective. So that's a great point. So
just spend your time more wisely.
Yeah. So we've got one more question about your book, and then I want to kind of open it up. And if you guys have questions, there's a microphone down here. You can talk, hopefully mostly to Kelly, and we can go from there. But
no,
really,
let's test Sean to see if he really read the book I sent to him.
So, don't do that. No, I'm just kidding. So, the book, I did read it, by the way. It's a great read. It's, it helped me out. I took a lot of tips from it and a lot of lessons that you kind of instilled in there. But what was the kind of the motivating light bulb moment that said, man, I got to write a book about this? Did you see something? Were you seeing people go horribly wrong down the path? Or did you have an experience that really led you to knowing that you had to write this?
No, so for me, there was never ever burning desire to write a book, and as I jokingly say, it's sort of more like Sigourney Weaver and Alien. Like at some point, like I had to, like it was in there and it was coming out, and I had to have this book. But I had been giving people a lot of advice and guidance about networking, and I had been blogging and writing about it. But for me, and this is sort of maybe the networking lesson in all of this, was when I finally said to people, I'm going to write a book. Sort of this like quietly, as you sort of admit your big ambition. And this collective sigh of relief from my network, they were like, oh, thank God, we've been waiting for you to do that. It's about time. And the lesson in that is you need to pay attention to the signals you get from your network, because they may be seeing more in you than you're seeing in yourself, and that's a good lead to start following. If people are familiar with Creative Mornings, the founder, Tina Roth-Eisenberg, she's Swiss Miss on Twitter. She also founded Tattly, those fantastic temporary tattoos, To-Do, which is a to-do list, and Friends, a co-working space. And I mention all four of her businesses because all four of those started because her community suggested, encouraged, prodded her to do this. And as she said, she would not have started any of that without kind of the power of community and the power of other people seeing more in her than she had ever envisioned beyond, being the fabulous designer that she is. So that's how the book came about, and that general frustration with the 10 things you should do to network better on a Monday morning kind of advice.
Right.
That annoys the shit out of me.
Well, I think that's a good segue. But just,
So I had to get one swear word in because that's like.
I got mine in early. You can
Yeah,
get
I
it
had
at
to
the
get
end.
it in there at the end.
But just to put that in, I think that's a great advice, and it translates not only to writing a book, which we discussed is very much like having a startup, right?
Oh, yeah.
So, show of hands, how many entrepreneurs do we have in the room?
Lots of them.
Lots
You got
of
to
them.
have lots of questions.
How many people are thinking about becoming an entrepreneur and starting their own company and getting more information here?
Yeah, we got a few.
Only
Yeah.
a couple crazy people. All right, that's good. No, that's awesome. But I think that's a great example to leave people with in terms of, follow what you have inside of you, follow what you feel, follow what people are telling you to do,
Right.
and make the leap.
Exactly. It's like we always need community. I mean, one of the things for me, I always think of my entrepreneurial career starting when I was, particularly when I was still in the legal industry, but I was on the management side. And I was at a law firm that would give me these really big, I was attorney training and development and then down in marketing, and they'd give me these really great big projects, and I'd be told it was the most important thing. Oh, Kelly, talent, people, it's the most important thing. And then they would hand me like a stick of gum and a paper clip and say, now, here's your tools, go make it happen. I'm like, no staff, no budget, swear to God, particularly the last project I had, which was to build this global alumni program. If I hadn't built the strength of relationships, sideways, across office, peers in every other department, I wouldn't have been able to get anything done. Nothing. And so whether you were an entrepreneur or maybe there's that bigger acute pain of needing community to, if you're like, well, I'm happy with my job, well, guess what? I think we all need to think in that connected, networked way where what you're doing needs the help of other people.
All right. Well, at this point, I'm going to get out of the way and let you guys interact directly with Kelly.
Someone wants you want a book.
Hopefully you have your elevator pitches ready.
Free book.
So if anybody has a question, come on down to the mic up here and fire away.
We can have our Monty Hall moment.
All right, here we go.
Hello, I'm Kim Bergeron with Artists and Clauses and RightBrainDiaries.com, and I want to ask you something about Twitter. and networking, because you brought that up. I find it a nuisance if I follow somebody as a courtesy. You know, they follow me, look them up, they look like they have interesting things to say, follow them, and then I get this instant Twitter saying, hi, thanks for following me, please
Oh,
follow
yeah.
me on Facebook, LinkedIn, here's my website, go buy my
Stop
product.
that.
Yeah, well, I was wondering, is it just me, or is that like rude?
That's number one reason why I'll go and unfollow someone, because that shows to me it's an automated account and they're not engaging.
Yeah, my first instinct is to unfriend
Oh,
them
yeah.
unfollow
Yeah,
them
yeah,
right away.
Yeah.
So
They
it's
get
crazy.
unfriended, they get unfollowed or muted.
Okay.
Yeah.
Good to
No, it's
know.
not just you. Welcome to the club.
All right.
Good. Oh, yay.
And I'll meet and I'll sign it after. If you want it signed, you might want to just give it away to somebody else, you know. Could recommend that.
Hi, my name is Dan Myers. I'm a partner at 4-5 Ventures out of San Francisco. I've been on the road for 9 months traveling the country looking for the best startups outside of the Bay
God
Area.
bless Road Warrior.
Give this guy a hand.
Woo! Give that guy a hand. So you finally, after 9 months, you end up in New Orleans and you're like, Nirvana, you found the startups.
It's pretty awesome here, I won't lie. I'm committing to do a full year of this, but I've already said I might
Are you
be
blogging
coming
about
back. Yeah, you're going to just slap me for not doing that.
No, I got an audience to slap you, so I'm
So,
good. I can sit here.
I'll take it all. I definitely have people in my network who have said, hey, you need to be putting out content. Steve Case, from former AOL CEO, has a Rise of the Rest thing. He has a PR team. I wish I had a PR team. Anyway, my question. So we're talking about networking.
No one cares about your career and what you want to accomplish more than you.
Oh, yeah.
And I'm going to sit here and go, you need to do this. It needs to be part of what you do. And it doesn't need to be a whole lot, but that constant drip of connection, that's what it is what makes you looking for startups easier, because people are seeing this journey, whether it's like a travel agenda of where you're to next and who you talk to. And that's where someone goes, damn it, I missed you. This is what I'm doing. And this is where I sort of get, if you think of everything that you're doing as your networking arsenal, and your goal is to find the best startups, you need all of that working in that direction. Not that not being on the road for 12 months wouldn't be swell. I sort of really just want to ask him who he's running from. What'd you do? But you want all of that working for you.
Yeah.
And pointing in that direction. So yeah, and I didn't have PR and publicity until I published this.
Yeah. I've been
Okay, so anyway, your real question
I
is,
was
you
saying,
didn't want that. I didn't want Mom to yell at me, but she
yeah,
did.
It's fine, I'll take it.
Have you been eating?
I have been
well,
experimenting
did you brushing?
It's New Orleans, you better eat well. We can talk about that too. I have been experimenting with Instagram as very short, quick posts that work well for me. I'm also very visual. Anyway,
Aidan Donnelly Riley, author, does short blogs on Instagram really, really well. Microblogging on there.
Yeah.
Anyway,
so
go.
my question, we're talking about networking specifically. Networking in terms of the return is one, usually very unexpected, and also a long-term, if, really any return. So I know you have begun some experience with investing and certainly advising. Do you see this, I'm a big believer in trying to be a little bit more creative in returns from our own positions that we take in startups and advising. Do you see maybe some of that from the network returns? Do you see that filtering over into the more investment side where it's we just want our 10x on our capital, we just want, the IRR that's high? Do you see, as you look at the returns from networking, do you see some of those benefits carrying over into the world?
I mean, I would say to any startup, I'm putting your hat on and being the VC, if the relationship is just about the money, I don't think you're going to get the same return.
I guess I'm also...
One of the case studies in the book is first round capital, and how by their strategies in terms of networking, from their newsletter to their conferences, their whole idea, how do we leverage, the handful of partners into something more powerful? How do we create a community with the investments that we're making so that they can help each other because, Rob Hayes is the partner I interviewed. Rob Hayes can't be everywhere all the time, and I can't be everywhere all the time for all of my founders, but I need to be there for them. Where's my proxy? How can I do this? So by creating this strong community, then by having that community and having their CEO, C-suite conferences that they do, now they have an ability to get feed and inflow for future deals. By having that strong community of the startups themselves who are helping each other, that's where they're able to say to the startups they're meeting, by the way, you really do want first round to come in on your first round because here's how they work with us. So if it's just about the money, I mean, there was someone who was speaking earlier on the other stage, and he said, if this is all about making money, go and get a job on Wall Street. It'll be a hell of a lot less, of a hassle than, either being a startup founder or an investor. Community's going to make it a heck of a lot easier.
I appreciate that. From San Francisco, it seems it's all financial vehicles, so I appreciate it.
No, build community. Community is going to get you where you're going, baby.
I believe it. Thank you.
And would you please start blogging and writing and doing more of that? Make your life easier. Unless you really enjoy airplanes.
Just for you.
No, yeah. But you know what? Listen, you might get American Airlines or, Southwest or somebody sponsoring you. That might make, that might be good sweet. You never know. We'll get you an Airstream. We could crowdsource it.
You and me. Thank you.
You're welcome. Give the guy a hand. Jesus.
Absolutely. I want to figure out where he's been and where he's going.
Oh yeah, I want a map. I want to, that's what you want, like that, the map you get with, ride sharing. They got the little car. I want that map with your little car, where you're off to. Okay.
How you doing? Winfield Ezel Jr. Obsidian Creative Studios. We do urban influenced and community influenced content. And my question centers around the comment you made about warm introductions versus cold. And give you a quick little background. I participated in NOE in 2015 as an entrepreneur with the DRA, Delta Regional Authority. So we represent a lot of rural areas, underrepresented areas. And then came back last year, hired by DRA to shoot NOE. So I say that to say this. 2 years ago, I would not have asked this question. And my question is this. When you come from a community as an African-American entrepreneur, and I only put that moniker on this for this question because I don't want to pigeonhole any of my other folks in here because we're just entrepreneurs. But when you come from a community that is so disconnected from an industry, I mean, whenever I hear somebody say, there's a lot of things, and this was just happened to be triggered here, the warm intro, I find that's something that sometimes people don't understand, that there's such a disconnect. Is there a process that you have found to navigate that cultural piece of separation? Because, give you a quick example in my community. I call somebody, a long businessman in my community, African-American, knows my family and everything, and I said, hey, I want to put together a room full of your peers to just talk about some seed capital. I said, I don't really have them. And the first thing he said to me was, have you ever heard of GoFundMe? And I was like, well, yes. First of all, he was 70, and I was like, well, if you've heard of it, I've heard of it. So that was the first thing. But, young Win would have said something like that, but older Win. And I use that as an example to say, even the places that it would seem that we could climb to that warm intro, there's just a block there because we just don't really think. I always tell people entrepreneurs have it bad in my community because we think of money in two ways, to spend and to save. It's not an investment tool. So I'm just wondering from, when you look at it from the networking perspective, is there some sort of navigation?
Yeah, and that's where I very much take a position of, besides being, I want to say, the skinny white chick, grew up middle class, had his quality public education, grew up in Canada, so it was getting a university education wasn't something that was a financial burden. My opportunities in life were only limited by the fact that my parents, probably am a disappointment to them because I am not living in Victoria, British Columbia, where I grew up, and why would anyone ever want to live there? But, that's their attitude. Why would you ever want to leave? I moved to New York and I knew 5 people and expanded a network from there. So I know I come from a place of ferocious advantage and privilege in that regard. But this is where, again, I think, we can make assumptions on who we think people are who will help us, but we can also start to look around more broadly at a larger community rather than the one we're immediately sitting in and say, where are there people who see the world we do and understand that opportunities can come from anywhere and anyone, and the world just gets bigger if we create more opportunity. There is not scarcity in terms of our need for innovation and improvement. And I think that's where I would sort of say, there's those of us who are out there, and rather than looking in the immediate backyard, you may say, you know what, I can try that because I always need to start with my own community. But if that doesn't bear fruit, I'm going to have to dig a little deeper. Now, where am I going to find that person? And there is, extraordinary entrepreneurs like Catherine Finney, who's got the big accelerator out of Atlanta now, working with Black and Latina entrepreneurs. Wayne Sutton out in San Francisco. And it's like, all right, there may not be, the tremendous supply, but there are people there, and that's who we got to get you connected to.
Okay. Thank you very much. And by the way,
And
your shoes are fierce, by the way. They need to go ahead and give it up for those shoes.
And come nab me for my card.
So we've got time for one more question, but if I know Kelly, I think she probably stick
So
around.
this is what I'm going to do. Yeah, I am around, so I'm not going to run off. 2, I know we got a big lineup, and there may be other people who thought they would answer a question. So there's, on my website, which is kellyhoey.co, it's a .co, it's not a .com. There's this little thing, you'll hover on it, it says Ask Kelly. And crazy thing happens, the email ends up in my inbox. It's me.
All right.
Ask Kelly, you don't get my people. I am my people. I will answer, and I will answer every single question. So if we don't have a chance to connect today, you're not this last person at the microphone, please, please, please email me or nab me and get my card and send me that email, send me that through the website and go, here's my question, I didn't get to the microphone because you talk too much, Hoey.
Let me know if you get any, like, around 11:30, 12 o'clock from Bourbon Street tonight. I want to know what those questions are.
Those are going to be special questions.
Yeah.
They're going to end up in a newsletter if I get
So,
those
yeah,
questions.
we've
If I answer at that time, that's what you want. You don't want the question. You want to see what I'm trying to, like,
Oh, you don't
I miss
sleep.
my BlackBerry. I miss that keyboard. I was so much more efficient and fast. Get really good typos now. Okay.
1-1.
Hello and welcome to New Orleans.
Thank you.
My name is Patty McCarty. I have a company called NOLA Driver, and I hire security professionals to drive people in their own car or rental, but we're expanding our executive protection. In New Orleans, it's hard to find people who need that sort of service, but we can go beyond New Orleans and Louisiana as well. How should I network with people who need executive protection services? Because it's a different socioeconomic group normally. And the people that we have provided services for generally have handlers, and those handlers find me. It's hard for me to find them.
Right. This is where I would say you having your online presence in the sense of the expertise around security. Like, what are the things in terms of what are you talking about and how are you showcasing your, not just your company, because people can find companies, but
Right.
they work with and hire people they know and trust.
And I can't talk about my clients.
No, you can't talk about your clients, but you can talk about security issues.
Okay.
And you can talk about, the kinds of things around that. So people are finding you as that expert on that subject.
I see.
And then you're getting the media talking about you, and they're like, oh, everyone's talking about this person, and she seems to know her stuff besides having a great website and whatever, because it's one thing to have a slick website. The handlers are calling and talking you. How can you speed that up so those people are speaking and talking to you? Like, how are you, maybe it's, where are you following
So
them?
generate a buzz.
Right, like where are you following them on social media for chance? But also, what's the information and how you're sharing it in terms of commenting on current news or filling in the gaps, like the second day stories, we like to say, like, how do you extend a story? Like, what are the things they're not talking about so that you're sharing that information? I share that because, one of the pieces that was published on my book in Vogue.com came about because the journalist, she didn't know I had the book. She was looking for someone to comment on networking, and she saw me having consistently talking about that on, on Twitter, and that she's like, hey, you seem to be the networking expert. The media is looking in a 24/7 news cycle. They're looking for experts. You doing things to network more effectively with the media may be a way to get, like, I'm going to say that free marketing, but the kind of marketing you want, which is you're the expert on this area, and you're the trusted name and the expert that anyone who's, the handler for someone who
Right.
needs that executive protection should be talking to. Why they're talking, why we're using that service. The person they seem to be talking to is this woman down in New Orleans. We should be talking to her. Why'd you get these jackasses? Hey, we got to get this woman. That's what you
Okay.
want.
Well,
And
thank
you're
you.
and you're in luck because there's a case study in here on
Oh, great.
networking
All
with
right,
the
there
media.
you go. Well, that does it for our session, but I want to thank everybody that came out, and
And
especially...
this is a comfy sofa. We could just sit here
I
all
know,
day.
actually, I want this moved into my apartment. But thank you, Kelly, for coming down.
Thank you for having me.
The book is Build Your Dream Network. I strongly suggest you pick it up. It's a great read. It's a quick read. It will help you out with the things you're struggling with, especially if you're an entrepreneur trying to figure out how to connect the dots across geographies or across kind of those bureaucratic levels in big corporations. But Kelly, it's been awesome. Thank you for coming down,
you.
and have fun in New
and
Orleans.
thank you for being on that side asking the questions. It's kind of
Absolutely.
fun.
Absolutely.
All
My
right,
pleasure.
thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Oh dear, I'm sorry that you grew up so soon. A cold year and no high school parties.